Today I'll be wearing rather social work hat, but I'm professor of education and social work. So, first, few words about the Global Development Institute. We are Think and Do Institute, which means we are reflecting upon integration politics, education politics, welfare politics, or social politics. We're doing research, consulting policymakers, government, or executive branch of power, and thinking and doing is probably the most precise description of what we really are about, our identities. So I'll be more like thinker, and Sasha today will present really practical, right? Practical approach in a youth work, right? And I'm here actually to share findings of research I've done, comparative research I've done both in Latvia and United States, but Illinois. And I've compared services provision approach, or even philosophy of services provision for migrant, specifically refugee and human trafficking victim youth. And there's some reflections upon some conclusions. Basic conclusion is sometimes when we, as helping professions or helping professionals, we receive persons with a migration background, let's say even experienced trauma-related, experience was trauma-related. It's very common to see our clients. I really don't like this client word. We see the other person as a victim, and sometimes my fellow social workers in United States. I can only basically speak about Illinois and New York. I've done some research with Refugees International too, some qualitative interviews and actually, really small size study. But common approach is he or she is the victim. He or she suffered a lot. So I will be guarding angel. I will be mother who will sometimes hold his or her hand, and because I know how to help. I know how society functions here. So I will be a mentor or guide, and I will guide this helpless human being. But it's not helpless human beings we are receiving here. It's totally not. And I'm here as advocate of strength perspective or empowerment approach in social work. Also, my colleague before spoke about empowerment in pedagogics. Basic difference is if we compare this traditional, conventional approach, we see, let's say, person with a trauma, young person, as a case, as a hub of different symptoms or diagnoses. But refugee youth are so resilient. We can learn from them so much, and actually I've learned a lot. So in a strength perspective or empowerment approach, person is unique, and we can focus on resources, on strengths of personality, rather on deficits, which is very, very common in so-called problem-solving social work, traditional social work approach. So if in conventional approach therapy is focused on problems, in strengths perspectives we see resources and possibilities. Also, we see a set of potential connected resources like family, like community. And again, community angle is really tricky. I've experienced one really failure case with trying to connect my persons I served as a social work professional to Ukrainian community, because Ukrainian community was not really welcoming them first, and they were not self-identified anymore as native Ukrainians. It's interesting. Identification is sometimes different as major or mainstream society expects to identify. So this can happen. So community angle is really tricky angle. Other case was very successful when a girl from India. I've connected her with Buddhist parish. Buddhist parish sounds funny, but with Buddhist community it went brilliantly well. Actually, Buddhist community did the whole social work instead of me, and they did in brilliant manner. If I've already mentioned this authority or of helping professional, even power of helping professional, it's so important not to stick to one's expertise and power, but to let the whole therapy process be guided by client, because he or she sees the way how to adapt, how to solve issues. She or he is handling much better than I, with all my education and expertise in a field. What else I would emphasize? Sasha will go really in depth in narrative approach, but probably I would mention one really crucial value, crucial concept. It is trust. If I trust person's ability to find a way out of difficult situation, to find resources to adapt to strange new circumstances, I'm acting totally different as a professional instead of the other conventional approach when I've met disastrous situation when one of my informants said, well, but she's a victim, and I should convince her she's a victim. I said, oh, come on, you are re-victimizing her. So sometimes with the best intentions, this kind of intervention, really harmful intervention, could happen. So there's always place for client initiatives and involvement in settling the problem. There's always place for collaboration, and only collaboration between helping professional and person I'm helping is possible and beneficial actually for both of us. And how cooperation, I have beautiful also some quotations of my colleagues from United States case workers, but probably I will leave a floor for Sasha to focus on narrative therapy with migrant youth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I would also start with some personal, you will change the slides. Okay, so with some personal introduction, I'm by myself a migrant, and in certain cultures I would be called a youth migrant, but some countries won't see me as youth anymore. I'm pretty old for them, but I have moved to live in Latvia from Russia 2.5 years ago. And what I wanted to present here, introducing as well the Global Development Institute, is a piece of some theoretical information combined with some personal experience and with some also research. And my personal experience is the personal experience of me, my family, and a small community of people who have recently moved to live in Latvia. And the academical thing is based on the research we have done for our master's degree in social work, and it was connected with the Roma communities in Eastern Europe and the strategies of social work and what is being done and what can be done differently in order to make a really social justice social work. And And the theoretical thing is connected with a couple of theories I will talk about in the beginning. So, yeah. So this is about narrative practice. I am also, being a social worker, I was educated to become a narrative practitioner. And it is often, I know that in Greece it is very widespread, this narrative practice. There is an institute that prepares therapists. I know that in Spain there is a rather big institute. It is mostly connected with private therapy, but its origins are from social work. And what is interesting about narrative therapy, as Liesma has said, that there are traditional ways to work with people and there are strength-based ways to work with people. There are ways that empower them, and there are ways that see the client not as a client but as a equal participant in the process you are doing together. So narrative practice was firstly developed by Michael White from Australia. He was a social worker, and anthropologist and therapist Derek Epstein. That's why this people say that this is practice. This is not some. This is some practice that is used in different spheres. But what are the main features? Even if in the cabinet of the private practitioner, private counselor, people will make a special emphasis on social justice and on the questions of dominant discourses and on the questions of what is happening in the society widely. It is strength-based, and it is trying to find some unique talents, values, intentions and hopes of the person, not the problems or not the things that are ruining his life, for example, now. And in this approach, the client is seen as an expert of his life and as the author of the story of his life. So the purpose of the practitioner is to help the person to retell the story of his life. And there are several special things that are used in narrative practice. One is about externalization. It is seen that in narrative practice that we should divide the person from its problems. So we should, for example, not say that this is a depressive person, but this is a person who met depression somewhere in his life, and he needs to somehow tell the story of this depression in his life and maybe retell the story, find alternatives to this story. Or that the person is not a migrant, but he's coming through the process of migration, and what does this mean? And this helps to stand a little bit aside for the person by himself, but also for the whole society or community that is surrounding the person, because it is actually the dominant discourses that want to place the problem and to equal the person and the problem. So often this process of retelling the stories is parallel with the process of opposing the dominant discourses or even deconstruction of the dominant discourses that are surrounding the problem in the society. For example, one of the examples we had when we were studying the Roma communities was with children. There were settlements where actually both refugees around Belgrade, refugees, people from the Roma communities that have been living there for several generations, people who have never identified themselves with Roma but said that they are Egyptians, for example. And we have witnessed the situation when they were youth who had, for example, father a Serbian and mother a Roma. And they have been seen by the service providers as a problem because they didn't identify themselves with Roma. So the service providers have arranged special trainings for those people to tell them that they are actually Roma, and the service providers were Serbian. So they were telling the youth what the Roma culture is and how they should be seen by the society around and by themselves, how they should internalize this identity. So, but what is actually very important in narrative practice that they have a special focus on community and community work. So every time even there is some private practice one-to-one with a therapist, they will always include this community level of work. That's why it is some basic practices are also very good used in social work or in youth work or even by educators in the class. So the other thing I wanted to speak about was the concept of rites of passage. As I have mentioned before, David Epstein is an anthropologist also, and actually the people who have invented narrative practice are very attentive to modern theories, mostly postmodern and post-structural theories and so on, but very, very also attentive to some things that are happening in collective cultures, in some community practices all over the world. So some of the ideas have been directly taken into practice from the African communities, from the communities of Australia, native, how to say, aboriginal practices. But rites of passage is really a classical term of anthropology, and they describe the rites that help a person to get from one stable situation to another stable situation and overcome some unstable condition. Actually, it really a nice metaphor to describe the whole process of migration or immigration and so on. But they also describe those things as giving birth, getting married, getting a job, graduating from the university, becoming a father, and even dying, mother also, and even dying, etc. So what is interesting about those rites, they are never seen in the traditional cultures as only some kind of individualistic things. They are happening within the community level, and often they are including some spiritual levels and some things that connect the person who is coming through this ritual with a natural level on how he lives and how he connects with the nature. The term was firstly introduced by Van Gennep, the French anthropologist, in 1909, and only in the 60s his book was firstly translated into English, and then Victor Turner has further developed this concept. So actually I'm very sorry it's having some small letters, but maybe you can receive that. I cannot see it, but maybe you have better vision. So I will read it out, and maybe you will later on receive it.
Reason for people to move a bit more.
Maybe. But maybe I can speak louder also, it will help. But the main theory is that there are phases in this passage process, and there is some kind of separation phase when the person leaves his stable life he was before. There is liminal phase, some place where he's not yet at the place he wants to come or he's expected to come, and he's not the person he used to be. And this liminal phase is very important because it is very, very difficult for every human being in every such kind of process, and people always experience some uncertainty, ambiguity, some anxiety. They feel that nothing is stable, that they are not, they do not, nothing is the way it used to be, and sometimes they think that it was better previously, for example, and maybe it is time to come back. And sometimes they see even on this level, they witness a lot of obstacles on their way. And what Turner has found that it is on this phase that the community involvement is very, very important. So this is when, for example, the tribal communities arrange some kind of ritual around the person who is coming through the initiation, And this is the moment when the direct and very close contacts with the members of the community are possible. This might be a very resourceful involvement for the person who is coming through this phase. And then the reincorporation phase comes when the person says to himself, oh, now I know who I am. Once again, I have reached some kind of point when I know where I live, when I know, for example, what language I speak, when I know what are my values, what are my aims, and so on. And sometimes it is described also with the metaphor coming home. I know that I'm at home now. So, what does this idea mean for us now? We are not living in traditional communities anymore. We are living in some strange centuries where nothing is stable and where everything is happening at very, very quick speed. And also in the so-called Western culture, we also live in very highly individualistic lives where the most emphasis is put on the individual success or failure of a person. What the people who are now practicing those ideas, putting them into practice in narrative practice, what they say is that modern world is like a person really is going through the liminal phase all the time. So there are not much stable phases, for example, of reincorporation in our lives. And there are certain places, for example, theaters. When we go to the theater and where we go to the cinema, we come as one people, as one person, and then we go through some kind of liminal phase, and then we are changed by the thing we have seen on the stage. So those practices like going to the cinema, going to the theater are also some kind of rites of passage. So we actually see the rudiments of this practice all the way around in the mass culture also. And also the processes of assimilation. A person comes to live in a new country and he crosses the border and he's already expected to be some kind of another person, to share some kind of values he doesn't know of, or to know how the public transport is used in the country, or to speak the language at the level that native speakers speak, something like that. So maybe if we find the ways to use the community here and which kind of the community could be of help here, then maybe it would change a bit the life of migrants and young migrants. So, and I will now a bit speak more about the theory, and then I will turn to this practical thing, how it worked also in my life. So the idea is that narrative practitioners are often describe those processes as journeys. And I think that maybe in your cultures there are some fairy tales or something connected with the story of some hero that is coming from one place and he is having some obstacles on the way, but he is finally reaching some kind of place he wanted to come. In Russia, we have a very strange fairy tale called Kolobok. This is a piece of bread that ran away from his family, and he is walking along the path and trying to escape from difficulties on his way, from the wolf, from the bear, and finally he has been eaten by the fox. And I think it is literally the metaphor that describes the process. He has been reincorporated the body by the body of another creature. So, but I think that the Wizard of Oz or all those stories are actually showing how how we can see those processes working, and how we can retell the stories based on some traditional and very helpful ways of seeing those processes in our cultures. So during these journeys are certain ups and downs, and this is what actually we have experienced on our immigration experience. In our immigration experience, we have left our country looking for better life, but also running away from some not nice things that were happening. And at some point, and it is always like that, we thought maybe we did the wrong thing, maybe we should return back. And this is what Michael White also described in his work with women who are expected to leave their abusive relationships. They start this process, this migration of identity, becoming another person, with the idea that there would be something very, very good, something that waits them, and something that will be better than the thing that they are leaving behind. And soon, very soon after that, and very soon in our migration, and very soon in the community that are surrounding us now in Latvia, we see and we can predict that the person who has recently moved to live here, for example, will say, no, everything is very bad. Everything is very bad, and I feel even worse than I have been feeling when I was, for example, living in my country. I'm nothing here, I'm nobody, I do not have any roots, I do not have any resources. And in the case of abusive partners and abused women, we know that there is a big tendency of these women into coming back into the abusive relationships. So what narrative practitioners proposed and what can be used is creating a map, because every time you go into a journey you have a map. And on the map you can also point that there are, for example, mountains, and there are, for example, some seas that need to be flown over, or there might be some particular nature, but for example, bad forecast, sometimes there would be storm or something like that. And the metaphor of map during this journey is something that can put this crisis moment into the context of general progress or moving towards the aim. And if you meet the obstacles in this case, it doesn't mean that you should turn back. That doesn't mean that you should go back and leave all the attempts you have already done and forget about all the successes you have already done. And what Michael White did, he actually did a graph. With the women who were trying to leave those relationships, they put months and they put the emotional state, and most of them draw this like mountain of big expectation and then the trough, this in-depth thing. And what he also did, he took those graphics and shown them to other people who are coming through this process. So this is how he included the community level. He has been trying to connect the lives of people, of women who have been coming through this process, the same process. Maybe somebody went ahead in this journey, maybe somebody has just started it, and so he connected the lives and the stories. And some of the practitioners do not use the maps, but they use other metaphors like seasons of life, and they speak about the winter, spring, summer, and autumn. Some of them speak about crossing the river, which is also a very archaical plot, like crossing the river Styx with a carry on with yourself on the boat. Somebody is accompanying you, somebody is leading you to some kind of way. And for example, this crossing of the river helps you when you speak with a person and he forgot that he had a bank before and that there would be another bank there. So you can remind him, now you're in the middle of the river, but there would be another bank. And sometimes people from that bank, they think that the other bank is very clean and it is very nice and wonderful, but then they come closer to another bank and they see that, for example, there is a lot of garbage there are lots of other things that they will have to deal in this reincorporation phase when they will reach the aim. So here you can do some kind of group work with people, invite them to take part in these journeys, and maybe if you are speaking with some kind of young migrant, you can speak about people who are surrounding him and who are, if this is a journey, who is accompanying him in this journey and who is already somewhere on the way further, and maybe there is somebody on the way back and maybe he can say something to those people on the way back, or maybe he can listen to other people who are on the way further. So, and what is very important in this metaphor, it helps to predict those backlashes, those very, very deep points when a person feels strengthless, his life seems pointless, he turns into this depressive mood and so on. And if you use this metaphor, you can do some homework. You can say that there might be those things, backlashes, that the person might expect them. And you can together work out the plan, how to deal with them, and to regain the sense of control, that the person is really controlling the process he's coming through. So, okay. So, how it can be used in practice with migrant youth, migrant people, how it can be used with people from different cultures. These are some points that we have been thinking about ourselves in our small community, but there are some things that are pretty theoretical and quite known. For example, the experience of refugees is the experience of people who are living somewhere, they're living this separation, they're coming through the separation phase directly into the liminal phase, but they do not really know the aim. They are forced to leave some place, but where do they go? And this journey without the aim is practically, by most of the practitioners, is seen as a very traumatic experience. So helping a person to formulate this aim, where he wants to be, who he wants to become, what of his life he would like to stay, and what he would like to bring to the new place. And the other thing with the refugees' experience is that most of the refugees are not allowed to come back. So even if they see, if they are in this depressive phase, when a person might want to come back to the place he came from, he is not allowed by the law, or coming back home is also means threats to his own life or well-being and so on. So in case with refugees, the work should be very, very meaningful here. And also, as we see here, we have been also trying to arrange some groups for teenagers. These are people of children of migrants who have moved and they took the their children with themselves, but they actually didn't ask, but it wasn't like a very voluntarily step when we speak about the teenagers. So the thing is that the whole family has moved and parents know why they did it, but teenagers or youth do not know, and maybe they feel very, very homesick, and they feel that in their family there is some conflicts of values or some conflicts of expectations and so on. So in this context, it is very productive to include in such kind of work also parents, not only the peers who have already, for example, experienced some kind of migration process. And when we work with migrant youth, we normally work with liminal phase and with a reincorporation phase. And actually, in migration nowadays, it seems like this liminal phase, before that, you had a lot of time to travel from one place to another. You would travel on the ship and it will take weeks. But now you travel with a plane and in 2 hours you are in a totally different country, but there is work to be done through this liminal phase. So actually it's not obvious that the person really traveled from one country to another. Literally you are already in the country, but inside of you, you are still on the way. You're still coming through this between and betwixt phase. And also, even when a person starts to feel himself at home at this reincorporation phase, there are also some difficulties, and there are also some obstacles, because at some point, person feels at home. In some spheres, he doesn't feel at home. Some things that are, for example, connected with his professional life give him satisfaction or her. Some things that are connected with the language, for example, make him feel confused and uncertain of himself and make him feel like a failure. So in case of migration, there are like lots of processes coming at the same time. And some reincorporation, well, this reincorporation phase can be marked by some formal things, like receiving a passport or getting a job. Or, for example, in my case, I have had 3 of those reincorporation phase things when I have passed 3 exams in Latvian language. The first one was A level, the second was B, and the third was C. And each time I received a certificate that I have it. And what is important in narrative practice, they always say that there should be some kind of celebrations, and the culture offers those kinds of celebrations. And actually receiving this kind of certificate is also a celebration in some extent. So if those things are not obvious and those things are not experienced by youth as celebrations, we can by ourselves as youth workers, as social workers, arrange some things that would be meaningful for these concrete people. And what also this idea of journey, what does it give? It gives a person a feeling that he is the one who is walking along this path, that it is not that some force has taken him or her from his or her origin country and put somewhere there, or that some government told that and this government tells these things. But if you help to develop this rich story authored by a young migrant by himself, he would be the one who is traveling. And he would, by himself or she, choose what norms or expectations he would want to face on this way, and which ones he would like to avoid, like obstacles, like rocks on the way, and which ones he would reincorporate, and so. And So this is actually something that has been developed by David Denborough. The last slide there is the name of the book he has written. David Denborough is a narrative practitioner from Australia, and he has paid special attention to developing community practices. So the practices that are not connected with individualistic work with a like client or student or I don't know, peer or some participant, but some practices that are helping to bring together people, and this is some kind of exercise that if we go through it, we will see how much senses and how much details is included in that. And this is something that can be proposed to people who by themselves feel that they are now in the process of migration, for example. So when a person comes to you and feels lost, you can say, oh, you are in the journey now. You are somewhere. You came from somewhere and you're going to somewhere. So maybe we could draw a map so you would find the way. And sometimes it is drawn like a path, some river that is flowing, and there are bridges you can cross over, there are rocks on the way, there are, for example, some wild animals on the way. And the person is asked to place himself on the map, and then he's invited to look back. And this is something that helps a person really to feel reconnected with things he has left behind, he or she. So lots of things connected with places, ancestors, culture, language, etc. Some kinds of fruits, something the person has been standing on during this, before coming to the separation phase, something he's taking with himself. Maybe he has taken some kind of suitcase and there are some photos of his family in this suitcase. Some those very, very basic but very significant for everyone things. And there are always people who have traveled before us who made these things possible. In our nowadays, for example, this function is you can find a lot of forums for people who have went through this way and give their experience. And it is once again a very nice opportunity to reconnect this person who is lost now with those people who have already walked through the way, and those people who have empowered him to go through this process as well. And all other things are helping a person, all other questions, to develop some kind of rich story of himself, as not of a person who is lost, as not of a person who is migrant or who is vulnerable or who is a victim or who is whose life is senseless and who has no strength to move on, to a person who is by himself supported, has talents, has values, has hopes, and so on. So, who supports you? What values, beliefs, or principles guide you? What places on this path you liked so far? Also, this is an important question because in this depth of depression, of this nothing is working and I'm a failure and I should come back home, or if I cannot come back home, that maybe I should not live anymore, something like that. It is very important to find exceptions, because all the way you have already passed, there were very nice things. And There were people you have met, and there were some nice connections being done, or there were some private small successes that you have achieved. What important milestones you have passed and what you have accomplished. And this helps person also to feel as the author of his own life, he is the one who has succeeded with something, not the social worker gave him the task, or not the educator told him that this would be, but this is something that he has done by himself. And also about the obstacles, because we have to remember that the obstacles are something that can be walked around. So if you remember, build on the previous experience on solving the problems, then it will help in this point now also. And what is your survival kit? This is something that person can take out, for example, if he meets a crocodile on the way. So this is a nice way to speak about the resources that can be at hand in some very low periods of time. For me personally, it was friends all over the world that have also left my country, and they were living in some different time zones, so I could actually write to them not only in the morning but in the very deep night when I was not sleeping and having anxiety about my future. So this was my survival kit. And the next thing is just reminding a person where is he going? Why did he just start this journey? What he wants to achieve, and if he didn't want to start this journey, where he would like to find himself. If it was involuntarily, maybe he could find some safe place where he would want to be. It is also connected with the communal level, because all those things also are not my individualistic. You can also tell somebody from your community or from the people who are behind you, what have you seen on this way, and what they could expect, for example. And some gifts maybe you have. We have, for example, seen we were very, very helped by a person who was trading on the local market with zinters, with amber. And she was the first one, and the first one who refused to talk with us in Russian, because she said, I want to help you. You now will talk with me only in Latvian. And then I have befriended her on Facebook, and she started to write to me comments in Latvian, and I had no choice. I had to answer her in Latvian. And then I have recommended her to all other my friends, so they all started to speak Latvian at some point after that. So that was really a gift, meeting this lady on the local market. And songs you will sing on the way. There are those traveling songs. They are very, sometimes, I don't know, some people like that, some people not, but these songs are things that are uniting people. So people traveling in the car and getting some song and all start to sing it together. So it's a metaphor for something that you can do together in the community, being a client, being a migrant, but you can find other people to sit in the car and maybe do something together. And the fourth one, the last one, even if you haven't yet reached the goal, you can look at the map you have done from the eagle perspective. So just once again to remind yourself about where you have been and where are you going to, and to think about this in a general way. So think about some good memories you will take in the future. You can even invent your own personal name for the journey you are making. It's not for for everyone. It's not migration, For me, it is called repatriation, for example, because my ancestors were from Latvia, and I would be surprised if I come to some service and somebody will say, "Oh, you are a migrant." I would try to tell my own story, how I see it. Sharing message with others, and also, well, you can arrange it by just making a group of people sitting in one room, or there are different platforms, on the web forums and so on, and sometimes the people even write stories. So some stories are passed around through for example, the practitioner. If a person is not doesn't feel convenient about speaking by himself, he can write a letter and give to another, through his practitioner, through his social worker or youth worker, to another. And those stories of migrants are really spread also in our small communities. We know that guy has launched a business, and this is how it worked for him. And this person has, for example, received the highest mark in the language, and so on. That teacher helped that person. So this is how it actually works. Yes, and this is the link for the book, where the instruction for this practice can be found in a very detailed way. So I think I have now 5 minutes for maybe questions.
Don't you think that, especially if you consider the theory of transnationalism, that the liminal phase for most of the migrants lasts
Forever.
forever, and it ends with death. So
Yes.
they never really.
Yes,
come.
this is the reality of our world. So that's why I think the idea of the term of migration is not applied to when you are experiencing it. Some things in your identity can come into this reincorporation phase. Like, I now speak Latvian, but I cannot say that I'm now Latvian and that's it, and I stopped to live. Now I came. So yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned the concept of the survival kit,
Yeah.
and you said that your main part of yours was friends. Are there other examples of things that might be found in this survival kit?
Some people have some favorite music they put on. Some people write letters to themselves. From the good day, they are in the good day, everything works, they have hopes and and they keep this letter with themselves, and on the bad days they can open it. So some things that might remind you of something, or some things that sports, running, eating, I don't know. So it's also in narrative practice that those things are very really private, but individualized, and some of them, some people, for example, they go and see a dog in the shelter. So this is what helps. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and thank you for such a great talk. I like very much your expression, ongoing journey without return. Just like, some of us like to go to Mars, and it's like a journey going to Mars without return. So what do you mean when you say immigrants? Although we are all immigrants here. So what do you mean that when you say that immigrants live without aim?
Not immigrants, I meant refugees, people who are forced to leave their countries. So the only aim, for example, was to survive, but voluntarily they would never leave their own countries. For example, so they are going to the journey where the only aim was to run away, but where? You don't know where. So this is the concept. So to help to construct where the person would want to end, or where he would feel at least comfortable, or at least he will feel safe. This would be something that will help, because otherwise he would end up in the liminal phase. He just ran and where. That's the idea.
So thank you for enlightening us. You use the term assimilation. Would you recommend to immigrants coming to Latvia to go through the assimilation process? Or?
No, it was used as the example on how the dominant discourses, these ideas, for example, there is an idea, assimilation, or the idea you should stop doing drugs in one day, or the idea you should be successful, and that's it. So you cross the border, and now you need to assimilate. Now you need to just in one day become another person. Now you need, for example, leave the abusive relationships and forget about the partner who has abused you. So this is what the modern world is actually asking us to do in certain concepts. And if we do not resist those voices that are surrounding us, then I think that assimilation process might be very violent towards a migrant, immigrant, refugee, anyone.